participants. We're glad to welcome you at our second day of a marathon on exclusive. I'm Yulia, Quality in Politics and Inclusive Recovery. I'm Yulia Matvienko, I work for NDI, and I'll moderate this session. I'll remind you that on our Facebook and YouTube channel of our partners, women are 50% of success of Ukraine, in both in Ukrainian and in English. In order to ask a question to speaker online, please leave your comments under the broadcasting, and our team will keep track of those questions and address them to our moderators. If there is an air raid signal, all participants will have to proceed to the shelter. For that, you need to turn left when we exit this room and go downstairs. Our partners and our NDI team will help you with that. The media marathon, Equality in Politics and Inclusive Recovery, is organized by NDI with the support of USAID. The Department for International Relations in the framework of the project of the model of participation in Ukrainian rebuilding, and also Swedish international cooperation and UK programs. We are grateful for long support of our programs. We are also grateful to our defenders for their fighting, and thanks to them we have this opportunity to get together, and we are ready to start our second day of our marathon on empowering communities, effective approaches and methods for working with underrepresented groups. I invite Alexandra Glishchinska, Executive Director of the Institute Respublika. Thank you, Julia. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I hope that it's really good for you. I hope that yesterday you learned a lot and had an opportunity to talk to each other. I understand that how difficult it is to not to communicate with people you have not seen for a long time, or when meeting new people. So I encourage you to get engaged and to participate in this session, because we will discuss really important issues of community development. As Julia mentioned, we will talk about expanding and empowering communities, effective approaches and methods for working with underrepresented groups. I'd like to say that our organization is operating in various regions in Ukraine. It's over 24 cities, and also those cities where people and various groups, representatives of various population groups, are actively participating in decision-making process. It really contributes to community development. So development of communities can be measured according to how much the people from underrepresented groups can realize their needs, can be represented and engaged into decision making. So our today's panel is dedicated to that. We have experts who will be sharing their best experience of representing underrepresented groups. And I have an honor to invite Lyudmila Chernenko, who is the head of the All Ukrainian Eco-Friendly Initiative. She is a psychologist and business trainer, and also Lyudmila from 2014 has been actively working with veterans, with military staff, helping them in mental rehabilitation. So Lyudmila is going to share her experience how to organize this kind of work in your local community. Thank you. Greetings to all. Yes, I am a psychologist. I specialize in PTSD, so I'll approach today's discussion from that side. And we'll discuss how we can engage and create equally comfortable space both for civilians and for returning combatants who express their desire to participate in rebuilding the community and in organizing various events. It's important to remember that a military person, to a certain degree, has and translates an internal conflict, because on the one hand we consider them as vulnerable groups, but they are not vulnerable groups, they are not victims of war, and many of you know that a military person is not a victim of war, they are participants in the war, and they can sharply react when you call them a vulnerable or disadvantaged group or group which requires support. So they want to be talked about as defenders. For a military, very often to accept support means to pay with their dignity. So when you try to be lenient to them, accommodating to them, they may tell you that they are not a vulnerable group. On the other hand, they need support because that changes a person. They need this support, but in a way that you preserve their dignity. Another important thing, on one hand, the military personnel, when returning from war, may want to participate in some activities, and there is a widely spread narrative saying that now the combatants will return and solve all the problems. As in any human being, they may be emotional, and they may be critical because they were fighting there, and now they come here and they have to fight again. So you should be mindful of that. It's not really what the military person will think, but it's just their manifestation of irritation. Another important moment, we should remember that there may be a misunderstanding from the standpoint of hierarchy, because in the army there is a clear hierarchy, and when that person comes back home in their new place of work or in new activities where they engaged, they are proposed to be part of another hierarchy. And if they come across some disregard or domination which they don't accept, there may be a conflict. And we have seen that from 2015. The military will say, they will tell you that we know who we can hear to, because those people deserve that, and they can give me commands, but who are you? So we are working in a team, and we want them to obey and to follow us, but they may tell you that you are not my commander, and that creates some problems in employment. So we have to discuss that, and it's not the army, it's a different hierarchy, but still there is some order, and we have to follow that order. So we are going to discuss that. And another moment, some resistance. On one hand, the military, when they're communicating in their circles, you can hear various attitudes to the general mass of civilians, like spherical civilian vacuum, and there may be some kind of accommodating attitude, but there is a conflicting and impulsing perception of civilians as those who are evading serving in the army, and people who are impartial. But on the other hand, their perception the perception of the military by civilians, it's clarification of the veterans. If they are fighting for us, they really need that, and there may be some kind of internal discomfort, because in some difficult moments which require discussions, a military may be very sharp, and on the other hand, we should be mindful that they really need support of civilians. I still have a few minutes. In terms of clear behavioral recommendations, I would like to focus your attention on the fact that there are some military staff who want to actively participate in public activities, and they can enter into one area, for example, regarding the draft laws, and they may have a very sharp position in terms of other initiatives. For example, if they are in a team with LGBT, they may be not ready to feel loyal to that, and maybe we can be in one team and struggling to achieve the same goals, but you need additional efforts to explain. Once I spent 8 hours talking to one paratroopers sergeant to explain and to bring a person who was who agreed to do that, to explain and to reconvince that person that is normal, and to understand why he had that bias. It was a victory, but it took us that much time, and that person was willing to discuss that topic. So there may be some internal conflicts with regard to the behavioral issues and the moments which I would call the moments of high attention. It's important to remember, if the military don't have a manifestation of PTSD, they have some such thing as professional deformation, which you should be mindful. Avoid sharp sounds. Don't slam car doors or the doors, or there is a draft which shut the doors, and avoid unexpected physical contacts. Sasha, if I can demonstrate like that, high, without previously established visual contact, and being sure that the person has positive attitude to you, so you should distance from that. And if the person was locked in himself or dozed off, don't wake them up, and don't touch them, and don't touch them. Just talk to them. It's really important. It's important for special operation forces, people serving there. They have a certain reaction of their body to that, and the military also have such a thing. They can sound, they can talk directly, and they sound like they are in control. They demand you to report where have you been, what have you done. So it's like a pretension to have more power. But certain professional deformation is behind that, because if the military came from the front line, they all know where everyone is, especially if it's combat raids. It's important to know that their comrades are alive, and they extrapolate it to their civilian life. They're trying to control their family more, and the family doesn't understand. They ask, are you not trusting me? And if they have adolescent kids, they may ask, where have you been? And that results in conflicts. And they also trying to control work groups. They're asking where you are and how you're going to do that. It appears they're interfering in the and go beyond their mandates. They have a habit of controlling, and they have internal like a siren which goes off when they don't know what's really going on. So they want to have their environment predictable. So he or she will ask more questions than we're used to. So that's what I could tell you in this period of time. So I'm grateful, and I'll return the mic. Thank you, Luda. One clarification. Please tell us, and you have said, what 3 recommendations you would like to give to civic activists and local authorities when you engage military staff to making returning combatants to decision-making process? 3 recommendations. First of all, to propose and not to convince. Trying to convince them they may perceive as pressure, and they're trying to be in control. And inside the team, you should have some behavioral rules, and the third, to be ready that a military person inside the team may be the author and executor of unexpected things. If a person is trying to be more like an intermediary and to be diplomatic and cut the corners and to be ready, you should it's important to ensure that you have such kind of person around, because they may have unpredictable reaction to certain things. I witnessed that on multiple occasions. So you need a person who will be like patroning on them, if they can pacify them and calm them down. Thank you. It occurred to me that we ourselves have to be calm in order to be able to facilitate such processes. So, using this opportunity, I would like to remind you that psychological support of people is really important, and we have to take care of our condition, because on our condition will depend how we engage other people in the decision-making process. Then I would like to turn forward to Oksana Solonska, who is a communications director of the NGO Fight for Rights. So Oksana will tell us how to engage people with disabilities into the decision-making process. So Oksana, the floor is yours. Good morning. I'm from the organization Fight for Rights. I'd like to tell you what we are doing. Fight for Right is the organization that supports people with disabilities. Before full-scale invasion, we worked mostly on advocacy and accessibility, but from the start of full-scale invasion, we transformed somewhat actually significantly transformed our activities and focused on evacuation, medical, and started to provide humanitarian and psychological support, legal advice, targeted support. What was the specific of the support? And our organization is that in 2017, mostly women with disabilities founded Fight for Right.
And services are provided to the people with disabilities, and we do understand that since most of our team is people with disabilities, and they were the ones to initiate the response mechanism, because neither our government nor the local authorities nor international organizations didn't understand how to work with how to evacuate people with disabilities, because it's different from evacuating people without disabilities. And in our organizations, we're actively promoting a human rights model approach towards disabilities, because we think that people with disabilities are participants and beneficiaries of the processes, just like the others. And there are two ways they approach people with disabilities, like they're heroes and memes out there, and like, look at this person in a wheelchair, he ran the marathon and just laying in your bed and you're just being depressed. And so this excessive heroization of people with disabilities creates stereotypes, or a different approach, when, a pity towards people with disabilities, like we have to provide them with some special services, or we have to pity them. And since people with disabilities are not approached from a human rights approach, that's actually a very bad stereotype. It's like excluding them from the society, and they're not regarded as normal participants of the process. This is why it's important to engage people with disabilities, because they can advocate their rights themselves, because they know better what they need. And I'm 100% sure that this is why our instant response mechanism is successful, because people with disabilities were engaged at the beginning of the creation of these mechanisms. And speaking about stats, we have some numbers. There are 15% of people with disabilities. In 2021, we had officially 2.7 million people with disabilities. And during the first 10 months of the war, this number increased by 45,000. And I mean, it's just an official figure. We don't know how many people with disabilities will have after the war is over. And unfortunately, the number of people with disabilities increases every day. And when we talk about this human right approach, mainstreaming of disability, I mean, what I mean by that is engaging them into every process, including planning of accessibility efforts. And I'm talking about all kinds of things, like ramps that are too steep. And so we need to engage them in every process in the beginning, without waiting for assessment stage. Like, these people should be engaged at every stage. And we often talk about diversity in the context of LGBT plus community, but also you need to consider that people with disabilities are pretty diverse. Because when we talk about people with disabilities, we normally imagine people with wheelchairs, and but they are pretty diverse, with different kinds of disabilities and disorders, like mental, physical, social, and approaches towards these groups should consider that diversity, because every one of them have specific peculiarities and features, and this will affect the way you need to approach them. When we talk about psychological assistance, the reason why you need to consider diversity, and like when you're working with women with or without disabilities, it will be different. When we did small research about mental assistance for people with disabilities, we know that women with hearing problems cannot get proper help. They can't call a hotline, and even if they find a psychologist or a therapist, well, just imagine how it's going to look like. Maybe there will be a sign language interpreter, and that means a breach in confidentiality. And I know that these women would sometimes write on the paper, and they said, how many sessions did you have? Well, just one or two, because it's just not efficient enough. And This means there is a reason why you have to have individual approach towards these people. The same thing with humanitarian help. When we created these humanitarian hubs, some women with disabilities couldn't use them because there are just 10 chairs and she's on a wheelchair, and you can't do anything about that. So this is why it's very important to consider disabilities at the very beginning of your design stage, when you develop your processes, your decision-making systems. And we design basic principles to approach people with disabilities. Can share it with you later. And as I mentioned, we have a human rights approach towards that. And this is why we always engage people with disabilities at every stage, from the very beginning. And we put human rights first. One of the key principles for us, this is what we talk about with our partners. They can give you more than you can expect from them. Well, you can just ask them for their opinion after you have, they do that for assessment. Like, for example, when you've done anything, you sometimes engage people with disabilities, asking their opinion, but they can do more. And it means that people with disabilities can be proactive or active. And if you suggest to local people with disabilities to be engaged at the early stage, when you just approach them as humans, saying, we do want to listen to your opinion because we need to make sure that construction happens with respect to your interests, and we don't want to do it for the sake of it. And they will be engaged. We have a network of human right activists, people with disabilities, and people, they come up with all sorts of ideas. And we need internet access, and I can't get downstairs. Like, I work remotely. This is why we need internet access, and that can operate during blackouts, power cuts, and just tell me where to write and where to send my application. And you have to be very active with them. You have to let them know that that they are normal people that can contribute as much as other people without disabilities. This is why it's very important to consider that people with disabilities are not just beneficiaries, they are participants of the process. Am I within the schedule? Yeah, everybody is good. That's great. So using the possibility, I just want to use the opportunity to ask more questions. Our organization is focused on working with people and activating them. And sometimes we have this challenge to engage people that are disenchanted. And in the context of people with disabilities, they can face different challenges. And they do. What can you tell them additionally to motivate them to be engaged in the process and recommendations in the local authorities? I think it's very important on the early stages to show them that you ask for their help not because you pity them. You ask them as experts because they probably know something more about the topic. And I just want to focus on that because this is a problem for most of the events. If I had a wheelchair or if I had some sort of a disability, I couldn't have get to this particular stage. So if you think that a person with disabilities asks for need something special, or you need to create a special environment for them. Well, accessibility. Well, I mean, in conversations and in architecture, it should be considered at a very early stage when you approach the person with disabilities. Well, sometimes they are disenchanted, that's right. Sometimes they don't believe that you really mean it. You have to, talk to them as your peers. Well, just trust me, people with disabilities are living their lives, and they don't often think about not being able to do something. They are able to do everything. I know a lady on a wheelchair. She was twice in the mountains, and she's cycling, and I said, well, I would never go to the mountains, the Carpathian Mountains, without any preparation. And she said, well, that's just can't help it. So people with disabilities, they raise their children, they drive cars, and when you approach them, just talk to them as their peers, not to people that need some special conditions because they're disabled. Just ask them what we can do to eliminate the barriers that the society has created. Thank you. Thank you very much for your advice, and we will move on. I would like to invite Anna Shurigina, who's a program director of NGO, Kharkiv Women Association Sphere. Anna, hi. I would like to go off stage. I work with the National Democratic Institute, or they work with me rather, for quite a period of time. And Ian, who was a director before, and he taught us to use space as much as possible. So this is what I want to do. Now, can you put my presentation on screen? Yeah, maybe you noticed that when people mention LGBT and they're kind of pointing at me. Well, I don't mind that. I'm an open lesbian, and that's part of my job, like being a talking lesbian. That's true, and that is proven by the research, NDI research. If you know personally at least one representative of LGBT community, you are able to treat them as humans, not just some sort of a sexual fantasy or someone's fantasy. This is why if there is an opportunity when I talk about LGBT community, I say, yeah, I belong to that community. I have a girlfriend that I live with for 10 years. And I've been raising a son. Because, I mean, he's older than 18 years, and he doesn't allow me to raise him or anymore. And I fight for my rights because Sphere is a lesbian feminist organization. It's about ideology. It's not about our sexual practices. It's about our belief that a woman can and should be, if she wants to, self-sufficient. And okay, enough of that. Where's my presentation? Can you please move to the next slide? Fantastic. Great. Look at this. This is 21st century. How do I click? Okay, I will now speed up. A bit of a theory. Even if you know, I just want to remind you that nothing comes out of nothing, and hatred and non-acceptance starts with saying, well, I'm going to swear a little bit, and I need to use that because everybody uses that word, but please stop using that word. Please stop calling Russians faggots. And this is a diagram. Like the first star is thoughts and stereotypes. The second one is privileges, biases, and hate speech, and the smaller one, the bigger one, is bullying, discrimination, and gender-based violence. Just an example. This one about faggots. This term, well, everybody knows that this comes from prison environments. I mean, first they adopted it, and then we adopted it. So this means a person that was raped and humiliated. So using sex, this person was humiliated. That's what a faggot means in Ukrainian and Russian. So sometimes we don't think about it, but when we use the word for people that we think are bad, we kind of fix that focus. We attach it to the LGBT community. Then what happens is, if we think that using the word, we kind of adopt a humiliating approach to LGBT community, and when people meet an LGBTI person, they think of that word, faggot, and it's like confirming that that person doesn't deserve normal attitude, and you can use violence against that person, you can humiliate that person. This is a not normal person, and everything that's related to it. I'm not going to talk about stereotypes, but this is where it starts. If you Google a picture related to family, and you'll probably see a man and a woman with a small difference in age with two children. It's probably a boy and a girl. But tell me, please, what percentage of families look like that? It's like we are lying to ourselves, and we are lying to our friends, and actually many women and children left the country, and they are not with their husbands anymore. Or sometimes there are kids that lost their parents, and we continue to call these families incomplete, and it just increases stigmatization that leads to bullying in schools, and you have to remember that. When you take decisions based on stereotypes, these decisions can be hurtful. They can be a mistake. And I forgot to ask you, have you seen the movie yesterday? That short film. And what have you noticed? Just 2 or 3 words. What are the differences between treating LGBT people and heterosexual people, like inability to enter the intensive care ward?
Inheritance rules, rights. Inability to marry. So I counted those rights and capabilities which are not available for LGBT community, and I would like to focus on the gender-based violence. These are crimes against groups of people based on their ethnicity, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, and so on, political adherence, and so on. So when those crimes are committed against, for example, it's a minor crime or murder in order to steal something. It's one level of hazard. I keep remembering that video when the guy says glory to Ukraine and he got shot. I personally feel that person with a sign of belonging to Ukraine and being a Ukrainian has a risk in it. Likewise, LGBT community, when there's a crime committed against another person in LGBT, that I feel like it's humiliation or crime committed against me. If you say this word faggot and there is a person from LGBT community, that person will feel like it was about that person. So that humiliation of human dignity is projected to that person. What to do? I drafted a few recommendations. I told you about the hate speech in regard to anyone. Avoid hate speech, that there are Catholics and there are Jews. Don't tell that. There are words which depreciate human dignity. Just don't use those words. Homophobic jokes. It should be a taboo. Same things like jokes about rape and jokes about violence. There is enough violence in our life. Let's not trigger ourselves and others. Kharkiv community. And somebody started to write that she is sick, and we were planning a program for humanitarian support, and we said that we are counting upon LGBT community and women. And he started to comment that she should be ousted from the chat and she's sick. I asked the administrator of the chat and said that it shouldn't be like that, and it's a humiliation. And he said that we are not a kindergarten, we are not going to educate anyone and to solve someone's conflicts, but that's not the issue of kindergarten or not. There must be rules of interaction, because we grew up in different cultures and we were socialized in different ways. We have different life experience, and we can set up the rules that the direct offending is not allowed in this chat, at that meeting or in that space. How to express friendliness? Maybe for me, as a woman of 46 years old, it appears that what's the problem? It's just a sign of rainbow. We're friendly to diversity. It's just a trifle. But for me, as a lesbian, I'll tell you for sure that this is really important sign. If someone, even in Ukraine's public space or at local level, if they are talking that we are welcome and we are open for that, we understand that people may be different. If we are saying that a family, the state does not recognize the LGBT families at the moment, but we as a community do. And at the end, I would like to tell you about the guy, a man. He is over 50, and I've never seen him. He lives in Bogodukhiv in Kharkiv Oblast. He calls me once in a while because my phone known to many people. And when I have time and resources, I talk to him. So we agreed when he calls me, I top up his mobile phone. After full-scale invasion, he didn't have enough money, and the mobile phone was the only means of communication for him, because he's not accepted in his community, and he needs contacts with people and connection. Last time he wrote to me that everything is very bad for him. He's really tired, that he's bullied. I'm talking about myself openly, but I got bulled, and asked him, what do you need? Maybe you need money, maybe you need food. He said, I have everything, but I lack dignity. So I can reassure you, how can you feel your own dignity when you are talking about our national identity and our resistance and resilience, and same things people feel with the signs of other identities, in particular LGBT community. So my main message probably will be the respect for human dignity, and it should be in the basis of everything you do in your communities. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for your openness and frankness and practical advice. I have a small but deep question. When we're working in a community and raised the issue of inclusiveness and talked about LGBT plus community and addressed the local governments, told them that you need to engage those people, we often replied. We got replies that we don't have such kind of people. What to do in this case? I'd like to say that most likely you don't know that you have such people among you or us, because LGBT people in Ukraine learned very well how to conceal themselves. And I know the older generation, people older than me, people over 50, they often live in marriage, in hetero marriage, and continue to live in the marriage, and most often men live with other women and have children and grandchildren. And the last example I remember from LGBT military, when the guy died, and his partner was lieutenant colonel, and he had a family and 2 kids, but they were partners, and his wife did not know anything about it. And now you understand that this is an additional tragedy to the loss of that guy. So don't tell that you don't have such people. Tell that you don't know anyone, and to think what you have done to find out about that. As you know, someone told me that you need more coming outs, and we need to LGBT people talk about themselves, so that this will result in changes in attitudes towards those people. But have you created a safe space for that? Again, an example: LGBT in military, LGBT soldiers, guys, when they do coming out in the army, they are referred to psychological expertise, or they're forced out from the system. Do you have those safeguards to encourage people to come out? What I would ask, what have you done to find out about someone? Thank you once again, Anna, and we're moving ahead. I would like to turn floor to Victoria Zaltukhina, who is the Executive Director of Group of Influence. Victoria, please tell us about IDPs who should be engaged in decision making. Thank you for invitation. Greetings to everyone. Before the presentation is displayed, I want to say that our Group of Influence initiative is working for the benefit of IDPs and for IDPs from 2016. So my today's presentation and my recommendations may be well known to you, but they are well tested in practice. So everything we use working with IDPs, but those principles can be applied to your other target audiences. All in the room probably know who IDPs are, and maybe there are some IDPs present here today. In general, we have a law in Ukraine on the rights and freedoms of IDPs, but I would like to draw your attention to the fact that these are really people who were forced. This is the key word. They were forced to move within the territory of Ukraine. Why I'm focusing attention on the word forced? Because when you start working with an IDP or create some initiative or idea to work with them, you have to understand that those people in your community, they came to your community when they were, because they were in dire strait, and that's requires certain specifics working with them. And why you should keep in mind the idea of engaging IDPs. Before the 24th February 2022, officially we had about 1.5 million officially registered IDPs. As of September 2023, today we have almost 5 million registered IDPs. So the number of people doesn't tell you that the more of this social category you have, the more you work with them, and if there are less of them, we don't notice them. It's not about that. That number tells us that in Ukraine, practically in all communities there are IDPs. More or less, they are present practically in each community, especially if they are relatively safer compared to the territories close to the front line. Another thing, often we come across an idea that here these people, they came to the community, why cannot they themselves become active, why don't approach us, and why then they don't come to meet us? And we understand that the adult people who can take care of their lives and resolve their problems. But you and us and our community should understand these are people who were forced to move to this community. They are facing with challenges. And people can cope in different ways with those challenges. First of all, this is the difficulty to meet their basic needs. This means housing, employment, and those basic physical conveniences which that person had before and now relocated to another community, having lost everything. It's difficult for those people to recover all that. Then severe psychological and physical health conditions. You know, people were living in different ways. They have their own stories more or less difficult, but we should all understand that those people more or less have those physical or psychological problems, and you should be mindful of that. This is also difficulty planning for the future. I'm coming back to my message that why they are not approaching us, they are not talking to us, and not participating in planning some activities, because this adaptation period of a person in new place is different for different people. The rule of thumb is 6 months, but it may vary depending on the individual, on the person. So it may be not yet the time when the person understood what they will do, whether they will continue staying or will move further, because some people relocate further and they hope that they will come back home. And you have to accept the fact that happened to that person, and there are a number of other challenges. I mentioned just a few, the most important. So to understand that it's not because of good life that person came to your community and wants to cooperate. So it's not the story about people having problems and we cannot do anything about that. No, our experience from 2014 to make friends, to engage and to acknowledge ADPs, it's possible and it's necessary. In the first place, what I would recommend to start with: analyze the problems and needs of IDPs. So these focus group surveys our organization before we propose something or implement something, or when we attempting to change something in community or in the country, we conduct surveys. They may be different. It depends on the resources available. It may be deep interviews or surveys or focus group when you bring together IDPs and conduct discussions where you ask questions about problems, specific problems they have in those communities regarding IDPs, and ask them what's their vision for solving those problems. They may be quantity surveys, they are more costly and resource consuming. It may be just communication, that you have your CSO, you can invite people, get to know each other and to analyze. You need to analyze problems IDPs have. You don't have to invent or hypothesize.
You need to ask the audience what they want. And then when you've realized what challenges you have for a certain category of IDPs or in your community, you definitely need to engage the IDPs themselves for searching for solutions. And for many years we've been working with IDPs, and it seems like we know everything, and when we face challenges we kind of know what to do. But every year, every time when we engage outsiders for our organization, people that do not belong to the organization, every time people come up with genius ideas, and you get complacent, and these people are new blood. They can provide you with a new perspective. This is why I think you all know this phrase. Like, don't make decisions without us, or don't solve people's problem without them, because it's not going to benefit people and people won't get any help. speaking generally. Also, it's quite important to raise awareness and communicate things to the audience in the right form. And what I'm talking about is we had a session about people with disabilities and engaging people with disabilities. But we should understand that among IDPs there are people with disabilities, elderly people, people with small children, people that are not mobile. And in order to engage IDPs, try to engage them all, you need to inform them about what you do. And in order to communicate that information, to make sure that information reaches them, you need to find out if it's accessible, if it's published in a way that is convenient for your target audience. Looks like you created a nice picture and you post it on Facebook, and it feels like you did everything. And if you haven't read it, that's your problem. But if you manage a Facebook page, you post news a couple of times a day, that's okay. But if you want to communicate your initiatives and your efforts to your target audience, IDPs or other people, they need to know about that. You need to make sure that it reaches them. There are lots of criteria how to make this information accessible. On our website, unfortunately, there is no QR code, but if you type it into your web browser, you will find out more about informational accessibility and visualization of your text for people with sight impairment, so that they can read it. There should be multiple sources of information, and the way you present it should be accessible. So when you start your communication campaign, please read about these criteria. They have lots of interesting things to read. But if you start to adapt your material step by step, you'll get there. We're still making efforts. We're still in the middle of the way, and we're not perfect, but we try to be as good as possible in terms of accessibility. So once again, the information should be accessible. This will ensure that your target audience learns about your efforts, and then they can make a decision whether to join you or not, and at least they will know that they can contact you. Another important recommendation: please share your experience and train your target audience, educate them. I'm sure that every person in this room has its weak and strong sides, and each one of you have experience in your communities. They may have implemented a project, a big or a small one, but there are people that you would like to engage to your decision making. You can see a picture on the slide. It was taken during a training for IDPs. We invited people and we taught them how to advocate and communicate. So you can do that in form of seminars, workshops. Formats can be different. You can ask people for the best format for them, but you can share your experience and show IDPs that the change is possible and they can be heard, they can be fight for their rights and interests, and this is how you can engage people. This is how you can train them. Why? Because maybe it's not the most important thing, but it's definitely important. Through previous recommendations I shared, you will be able to implement your ideas, because we can inform this target audience, we can train them, and that's, of course, it's quite important. But what I encourage you to do, please do that together with your target audience. Engage them as much as possible, including, well, I'm talking about IDPs, so this is what I'm talking about. This is what I mean here. And based on our practice, we had projects, big and small ones, where we put IDPs in the leader position. They tell us what they want. Our organization and our experts were just supporting them. They could jump in and help them, coordinate them, help them financially, because some projects require financial support. But nevertheless, the results that we got when implementing these projects were great. Not sure if you can read the text, but there are some examples here, like IDPs from the Kryvyi Rih that had their program approved. So I provided this example because we already have good projects for people with disabilities as well. So that they had this group, action group, consisting of people with disabilities. And we have cases a lot. Well, I'm running out of my time, but by the way, it's going to be the last slide. The national advocacy campaign to protect electoral rights. And IDPs were drivers of that change in the electoral code. So I would like to finalize and conclude my presentation. You need to work closer with IDPs, and that's useful, that's interesting, and as soon as you start your communication with them, if you didn't do so, you will see how much experience they have, and how much efforts and how much enthusiasm they have. So you can really change our country for the better with them. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for your experience in your organization. Thank you for such a nice presentation of your practices that already work in the events where we can engage both locals and IDPs, help and facilitate integration and understanding between them. So this format in the form of training, strategic sessions, or public consultations can engage people and can facilitate understanding of their needs, which is more important. Thank you very much for your presentation, and we will move on. I'm inviting Natalia Tarasenko, who's an expert in gender-oriented governance, and tell us, please, how to engage women in decision-making. Well, first, it's important to engage women and all groups that we talked about and we haven't talked about today, because gender-oriented governance is about considering different interests of men and women that live in your community. In order to do that, you need to understand who exactly lives in your community. And even before the full-scale invasion, we had different examples in communities that had different experience in collecting gender distributed data to understand the gender landscape in their community. And today, part of statistics is not quite open, not quite public, but one way or the other, you need to manipulate, operate these data that are officially collected, officially published, but at least you need to understand that to officially build your processes. When you need to understand who are you managing, not just abstract people, units, but you need to understand what people are they and what needs they have, and you have to be aware of that, and you have to be aware of the fact that your needs can change in time. And people in your community change as well. So I think yesterday and today you heard different presentations and speeches about communications, about reaching different categories of people, men and women. And it shows you that we need to expand, to open our mind. And it's not too hard to do, you just need to put some effort into it. And you need to understand that people living in your community have needs, and it's about whether we as managers, activists, businesses, deputies are ready to open our minds in order to make sure that our decisions and managing process from the planning stage to implementation and monitoring, assessment is sustainable and efficient. In order to ensure that, you need to make sure that there is gender focus on every stage. On the other hand, you need to take care about the integrated approach. I think you're well aware about the fact that if we purchase low-floor buses for our community, it will be more accessible, will be accessible for all people with disabilities, because you need to train drivers, you need to train your staff. So just having a transport available for people, it doesn't mean that your service is accessible. Or with humanitarian hubs, just by distributing humanitarian goods will facilitate a successful integration of disabled people. That's true. So you need to be honest to yourself. And even when we make mistakes, it doesn't mean that we are bad people or we want bad things to happen. We do this with good intentions, but it doesn't always look effective. Why? Because we sometimes are limited by our capabilities that don't always correspond to real needs of the people. So this is why you need to reassess capabilities of your structure, your agency, and not just measuring it with the number of walls and floors. You need to focus on people providing these services. And when we talk about understanding needs of military, communicating with them, I think every day you read about the news when these people, these service people, men and women, they are not they prevent them from getting into buses, and they, like drivers, they have to check their documents, whether they really been on the front line, and it looks humiliating. So if you want to make sure that these people are treated with dignity and respect, justice, and your communities are developed during the war and after the war is over, you need to think about helping people providing services be aware of communications and that they know what not to do. For example, do we have any managers here, like in the public sector? What if I ask you a question? Have you ever had this experience where you have enough funding in your communities for training programs for your staff on how to communicate with different people publicly, and how much funding is allocated for effective communication? This is what my colleague talked about, like not measuring your success with a number of posts without understanding that this information reached a small amount of people, and maybe the wrong audience. So the question is, please raise your hand if you work at your local council and your council decided to invest into educating your staff. Do you have that experience? So we don't have many people like that, and often they try to save money on that, and they said, like, just raise more money on grants. And we're well aware that donors and grant organizations, they give us possibilities to focus on certain categories of people, men or women, or certain problematic areas that weren't a priority for us. But on the other hand, you're well aware that this is an opportunity window, and it's not going to be open forever until we face the reality, until we, face people that live down the street. It's not going to happen. It's not about infrastructure figures. Of course, they benefit people as well, but it's critical to measure your success with something other than number of infrastructure sites. You need to develop human capital, because without human capital, you're not going to have any infrastructure. And getting back to the previous issue, among people, if you look at the demographics, like the majority of people that lived here before the war, that's women that were excluded from the decision-making process. They don't always sit at the table where decisions are made and their voices can be heard. And by the way, the gender equality index that is measured every year shows that if you judge by the political participation, our situation is pretty bad. So when we talk about how our different agencies are created where decisions are made,
how the community develops in conditions of full-scale war, or a region develops, there is a certain procedure which positions can be engaged, and it doesn't mean that if you have fewer women on those positions, or practically you don't have women, it doesn't mean that we cannot use other possibilities to really take into account the needs and interests of various women groups. And we are aware now that even when men are fighting at the front and women are fighting also at the front, and some women have children which need care and the practice of other countries, unfortunately, which had conflicts or wars. They demonstrated that the war even further deepens those gender gaps that they had before. And we're you can expect that here too. Those women who are active in volunteering in the community and other spheres, I personally see various risks of returning, even if, especially when we're talking about decision making. Yesterday, colleagues mentioned about that resolution of the cabinet, which really is, which is a small detail, but it creates more barriers than possibilities. So, to conclude, each of us, irrespective of the level we can influence in terms of decision making, we should influence in a way that those decisions create new opportunities for various people groups and not the barriers, and that can be one of the measurements for our day-to-day activities. When we're talking about inclusion in a wider sense, it's not always about simplifying our life. If we are engaged in managerial processes today, it's about learning how to engage representatives of various groups of people of which you don't know much, so that your work becomes more efficient and your work in result of that produces better results for lives of those people. So if people want to stay in the community irrespective of the circumstances, it means that you do everything right. You create opportunities to make life in the community safe and secure in the wider sense. Analyzing the security programs when they were measured by the number of CCTV cameras installed, we don't think it's the only measure which will solve the security issue in each settlement and community, also with the view of the ongoing war. And in terms of mining, we have a lot of many years ahead, and many of those regions will be restructured from the standpoint of employment and so on. Colleagues mentioned here that nothing can be done without our participation. So I would like to encourage you to focus and expand your mindset. Thank you, Natalia. I'm really grateful to all our speakers who presented this important topic of inclusion of underrepresented groups into the decision-making processes. So I would like to summarize this panel with a statement that we are struggling today for our identity, so our personal boundaries as well as the boundaries of the state could be respected. And when we're interacting with people around us, we should keep in mind the fact that each person has their identity, and we should respect the boundaries of those persons and remember about our own ones. I really appreciate, I'm grateful to you for presenting those useful practices which you can apply in communities. This is just the first stage of our session. Then we'll have group work where we'll be able to discuss more between the experts and the participants those issues which are outstanding at present regarding the participation of underrepresented groups in decision making. All the viewers of our translation on the Facebook, this broadcasting will be suspended and it will start again at 2 p.m. So stay with us. It's really important for us to know that you are engaged, you are watching and commenting and sharing these practices in your communities. So I encourage you to stay with us and come back after 2 o'clock. Now we'll have, in my opinion, not an easy task to split in 3 groups. Each group will have 2 experts, and in each of those groups we will discuss such the following questions. They will be printed out. I'm just going to articulate them. What are the negative consequences the community will have if underrepresented groups will not be engaged in inclusive recovery of those communities? What are the pros and cons? What are the advantages and disadvantages the community will have if underestimated groups will be presented? And what are recommendations and steps I need to take? I will take in my community in order to engage underrepresented groups when you come back home to your communities. So these are the questions for discussion. We'll have 15 minutes for each. And now I'll kindly request all of you to get together.